Hi everyone, my name's Ercy and welcome back to my channel. In this video, I'm going to give you my thoughts on The Arm of the Sphinx by Josiah Bancroft, the second book of the Books of Babel series. If that's something you want to see, then stick around. So let's start off with why I picked up this book. I wound up picking up this book shortly after reading Sensyne Ascends, and I absolutely love this book. 5 out of 5, one of my favorites. So good. So right after I finished this one, I wound up just going to the bookstore and grabbing this guy right here. And spoiler alert, I really love this one too. Right after reading this one, I had to control myself. I was immediately going to go back to the bookstore and go and get the third one, but I have a couple of other books that I need to read first, but I will be getting back to the series, but this is such a good book. Let's do a little recap of the genre. This is a steampunk fantasy book. There's a lot of technology and futuristic machinery incorporated throughout the text, and that sort of replaces the magic that we see in a more traditional fantasy novel. Just some quick information about the publishing of this book. So the first book was originally self-published in 2013. And then this one, Arm of the Sphinx, was originally self-published in 2015. And I believe they both wound up getting picked up by Orbit Books. And then they were released digitally through Orbit like in 2017. And then they both came out in the physical paperback format from Orbit Books in 2018. So I think that's really cool that Josiah Bancroft was able to self-publish and a publisher was able to see his work and believe in it and release it on its own release it through the publisher. And I really think that's so cool because it wound up reaching more people that way, and for a good reason. These books are amazing. So I'm really glad that he was able to get picked up by Orbit, because that was really cool that he was able to get recognized like that. But what is the book about? So like I said, this is the sequel to Sensyne Ascends, and it picks up right after the events of this book. So if you haven't read Sensyne Ascends, I suggest you stop now, go get the book, read it, and then come back. So that way we can talk about this one. But it picks up right after the events of the first book. Sensyne and his crew wind up escaping the tower through a stolen airship, and they have to resort to a life of polite piracy in order to make ends meet and survive. But they have to find a way to get back into the tower in order to resume the quest to save Sensyne's wife, Myra. But what's really hard about that is that now they are fugitives and they are escaping capture, trying not to get caught. They're leading double lives, sort of, in order to escape capture. The ports won't allow for re-entry as easily as they had hoped, so they have to resort to finding the mythical Sphinx in order to get its help, but the help of the Sphinx always comes at a price. So that is pretty much the theme of this book. They're still resuming the quest. It's a lot of fun because a lot of unexpected things start to reveal themselves, especially about the tower. Like the tower, just learning about the tower is a whole topic on its own because it's incredible. Some themes that I want to touch on in this book, definitely found family was one of the big tropes that we found in this book. Identity is another one. Definitely man versus self, or also man versus society is another big theme that we see here. Power and corruption, and then of course the essence of morality is always one of the big themes that we see throughout these books. But what did I like? So much. One of the first things I want to talk about is the lyrical writing style that Josiah Bancroft uses throughout the whole series, particularly in this book. The metaphors, gorgeous. I loved it. The way that I like reading this book, I felt like the perfect setting that I set up for myself was, as I was reading this book, I would put on like some lo-fi or like chill hop in the background, you know, like some cool instrumentals and stuff. And I would just be reading this, and I felt myself being calmed while also being super tense by the plot in this book. It was a weird thing. It's like I'm super calm and chill and enjoying the words, but I'm also like hype because of what's going on in this book. And it was just like a really cool feeling that I did for myself as I'm reading this. But I feel like the lyrical writing is just something that is out of this world. Josiah Bancroft has a way with words. If I were ever to write something, I would wish to be as poetic and beautiful in my writing as Josiah Bancroft is in this book. I'm going to give you a little taste of the writing. This is like the first little captain's log that you see here. The difficulty with the disguise is that it must be worn for some time before it hangs credibly upon the shoulders. But if worn for too long, a costume becomes comfortable, natural. A man always in disguise must take care lest he become the disguise. This is the Stone Clouds logbook from Captain Tom Mudd. But yeah, like his writing is just so lyrical, and it makes you want to sit with the sentences for a moment because it was just superb. I love the writing style. I also love that this was changed from the first book in terms of the POV. In the first book, we pretty much only get Senlyn's perspective of the tower, which was a great introduction to the character, the story, the plot, everything. But in this book, now that we have a sort of crew behind Senlyn, we're starting to get their point of views as well. And I really love that because we got to really know them as well and get inside of their heads instead of Senlyn's perceptions of them, especially because in this book, Senlyn's perceptions are a little clouded for reasons, but we really get to know them and their motivations for switching over and supporting Senlyn in his mission or in their own missions, and just learning about them and what pushes them and drives them to be the way that they are, as well as we're seeing their changes. And that was really cool, especially Iron. In the first book, we learn about her. We see her as sort of just the muscle, this big brute of a woman. And I mean, she's scary and she's a force to be reckoned with. But in this book, we see the change in her, and we're learning about her and the things that she keeps inside of herself. And she's really introverted. The change that we see in Iron, I loved. I loved all the characters, but Iron especially was a surprise because I was expecting for her character to kind of stay a little constant, maybe change a little bit because she was taking lessons from Senlyn. But in this book, we really see her character change and develop throughout the story, and I really love that. The idea of polite piracy was so funny to me. It's like you're still committing crimes, but you're trying to do it in a way where it's not so bad. To keep your moral character intact, and I thought that was so funny. The scenes at the Golden Zoo were also incredible. I really loved them. It was pretty much like a whole new world within the tower. I mean, that's the whole idea of the tower. It's like each ringdom was its own world and system and society and the way things work. But the Golden Zoo was really surprising to me, the way that even the ecosystem in the Golden Zoo, or in that ringdom, I believe the Silk Gardens, was just like a world of its own. And I thought that was so cool. Like the way that we had different creatures coming in. And I don't know, it was one of those things where it's like, okay, this is definitely fantasy. Like you having these creatures coming out and just be another force to be reckoned with within the story. Another hurdle that our characters have to overcome. And also the way that we see the Hod society formed in this. I thought that was really cool, like to see what was going on with them and to learn a little bit more about that and the Hod King. I love those scenes. The same thing can be said about the Sphinx. I kind of predicted what was going to happen with the Sphinx or the idea of the Sphinx, but I really loved how Josiah Bancroft took it beyond my prediction. Like I had an inkling of what the Sphinx character was going to be like, but I loved where he kind of took it in terms of setting up the atmosphere of where the Sphinx was and what the Sphinx is all about. I really thought that was cool. And the visions of Myra were another thing. They were haunting, and the resolution to that was definitely a surprise. In terms of things that I disliked about the book, there really wasn't much. It was just one little thing, and that's more of like a principle. But even though I disliked the principle of what it was in terms of the changing of this one relationship, it made sense. So it's a dislike for my principles and my morals, but it makes sense for the story. So it's not even like I disliked it that much because it made sense. The way that these two characters changed in terms of their relationship with one another. Like, it made sense because just the way, the timeline in which the events of these stories takes place, it makes sense for things to change. So even though I know I went on a rant about this theme in another video, the video about the memory police, but it makes sense in terms of the complexity of the human emotions and even the way that relationships can change over time. So it's not really so much of a dislike in terms of this being a topic of discussion. So I really can't have anything to say in terms of a dislike for this book because it's so good. Maybe you can say that I disliked how much I love this book because my wallet is not happy because I need to go and get the third book. I actually went to the library to see if they had the third book and it was checked out or they didn't have it. So I need to go buy it. So my wallet is not too happy with you, Josiah Bancroft, but I think we'll be okay. As far as my rating goes, I mean, if you couldn't tell, I'm giving this book 5 out of 5. I loved it. It was so good. The writing, the story, the plot, character development, everything. I loved it. It was so good. And I'm really excited to move on to the third book. So that's pretty much going to be it for me in terms of my review of Arm of the Sphinx. I love it. It's so good. I have nothing bad to say. It's just read the books. They're so good. If you've read it, let me know what you thought of the book because I'm sure we're all on the same hype train as far as these books. The hype is real for a good reason because they're so good. I love it. But yeah, let me know if you've read it or if you want to read the series. The comment section is always open for any and all thoughts concerning these books or any other books that you're reading. But yeah, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, subscribe if you want to see more. I hope you all have an amazing day, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.